Greetings and welcome to In Depth. I'm Dike Rostant. Richie Spice says that life is a cycle and everything that happens, it will come around in a circle. And it's almost 2 years to the day that we have experienced another expression of rage at the manner in which members of the citizenry and those supposed to protect it have engaged. Psychotherapist Shakir London, he joins us to partially navigate a framework for community healing. Welcome, Shakir, and thank you for joining us again. The last time we spoke, we started off asking some of the effects of depression, specifically on men. I want to enlarge that a little bit, asking about the effects of trauma on persons as well as trauma on a community.
Pleasant afternoon to you, DK, and to all your viewers this afternoon. Yes, so the effects of trauma on the individual, they are wide-ranging, and they can be different depending on the individual. You're going to have the emotional effect, the shock, denial, or disbelief, extreme sadness or anger, irritability, anxiety, fear. So you're going to have these feelings in terms of the emotions. Cognitively, or with regards to the cognitions, you may see signs of nightmares or flashbacks. You may have confusion, problems concentrating. So that is going to make schooling and going to work and doing those types of things difficult. In terms of the physical signs, you may notice problems sleeping, as well as hyperarousal, that hyper state of vigilance or wariness that someone may experience. In recent years, there has been a slight shift in terms of understanding trauma, not just from an individual perspective, but now from a community perspective, from a collective trauma perspective. And so you may find feelings of anxiety and anger and tension as with someone who goes through it, as with the individual. But what you may also find in the community, in terms of effects of trauma, you may find a fragmented community where there are where a lot of these social relationships become damaged. You may find a deterioration in terms of the built environment, the infrastructure. The physical spaces are not maintained, and the quality of the infrastructure, they're not kept in a particular way. You have unhealthy public spaces. You may find also a destructive social norm within the environment, one where there's a lot more violence because of the amount of anger that individuals may be experiencing, and then you would also find generations of poverty or of unemployment, limited employment opportunities, overall community disinvestment and dissatisfaction. And many of these symptoms of community trauma can themselves become trauma perpetuating circumstances. So the symptoms can be circumstances that causes trauma in the future, and you have this cycle that tends to play out. So go ahead.
I like the fact that you talk about that cycle as well, and there are so many things that I think I'm going to throw away some of the questions that I had and just kind of follow up on some of the things that you started to speak with. But everything adds up, but is all trauma equal? And I started off this conversation kind of hinting at that the events that would have led to Kutain, Brooklyn Decent, Freetown Collective, and a few other people coming together on a song. And Kutain starts off saying, what you feel and I feel may not be the same. The same emotions can leave memories in the brain. But are there some types of trauma that we need to deal with quicker than others, and what do some of those things look like?
But to address the first part of your question, in terms of equal, a person's experience of trauma is largely subjective. Based on his or her experience. People have different experiences. How you perceive a traumatic event, Dike, may be different from how I perceive it. And it's often dependent on someone's age, their personality, their health, genetic makeup, the ability to be resilient, and as well as multiple traumatic events taking place. So these are the types of things that will determine how significant the impact is on the individual and the community. Having said that, we also have to be mindful that trauma resulting from loss of life can be even more difficult to navigate, as one has to also deal with the effects of grief. Yeah. So just to answer your question, different people can experience trauma in different ways. Do we need to deal with some types quicker than others? The trauma that is associated to grief. I think those are the types of trauma that we need to really pay attention to, because you're going to have all these stages of grief coming to the surface, the extreme anger, the extreme depression, the bargaining. I wonder if we had done something different, if he didn't go out tonight, or if she didn't go out this evening, maybe we would have had a different outcome. The feelings of denial and shock. So it compounds the traumatic experience that the individual or the community may have.
And we have about 3 more minutes on this side of the conversation, and one of the things that you spoke about is physical structures or infrastructure, and I want to tie that into what it is we see in terms of physical spaces and how we treat with that in terms of our mental spaces, because this is making me think of the broken windows theory, in the sense that if a place is nice, or if you say there's a room that is nice, is well taken care of, it's a little harder, or you'll think about it twice before you dirty that room. If the room not run already, man, anything goes. But how do you tie that in terms of saying physical infrastructure versus mental spaces, and how we treat with some of those spaces within ourselves, within our communities?
Well, I mean, you're right. When a place looks a particular way, it tends to affect how we behave in that space. And so how we treat with the physical space and how we treat with our mental spaces is going to be different when you're targeting an individual as opposed to the population, or well, to the community. If you're going to deal with the community, there are several things that has to happen, and really it's about treating with that systemic ways in which a community is experiencing trauma and has experienced trauma. For me, and just my reflection on it is about building social relationships, relationships with networks like the police force, government agencies, actively supporting social services within the communities, a focus on collaboration with, amongst the NGOs and the churches and different religious organizations, as well as community groups and organizations. So you have them coming together, because the idea is we have to not just change the physical environment within our community, but we want to cause some lasting change, and we want to target some of the challenges that the community has been experiencing that goes beyond just the shooting incidents. Some other approaches that can be used, physically improving the outdoor spaces. Well, we mentioned that, to create safer spaces for our young people where there can be expressions of culture and positive values within the community, where community members can feel safe. Yeah, you have also an increase in youth development programs. It says that, a lot of these fall on external contributors, the government and so on, but you're creating the idea that we are contributing into the young people of our nation and into our children, and that just get towards encouraging healthy behaviors and things like parenting programs and so on. Placing a focus on the workforce development, a focus on the skills development within the community, the attitudes, the values, the work ethic. It may seem like these are not necessarily addressing the pain as a result of the loss of life, but the pain as a result of the loss of life is just the trigger to what has already been happening and bubbling up within our community. And so
we're going to talk about that trigger when we return, because I want you to expound on that a little bit. We're speaking with psychotherapist Shakir London. We are looking at building a framework for community healing. Stay with us. We return with more. Welcome back. We are going in depth on building a community healing framework. We're doing so with psychotherapist Shakir London. And one of the things I really appreciated that you were saying before we went to the break, Shakir, is that yes, there are many things that may seem external to a community, but there are so many factors that are involved. Because I think sometimes we say, okay, well, this particular thing happened to this particular person. So we can do work on that person, and that might happen outside of where that person is from. But sometimes we fail to remember, or we just choose not to acknowledge that that person is going back into that situation where there may be some of those same triggers. So continue speaking about those triggers for me, please, as we continue the conversation. Thanks.
So I mean, in terms of the triggers, what I was mentioning was, the impact that governmental organizations may have to play in addressing the issues within the community. The incident that took place a few days ago was a trigger, you know, and you can have underlying issues within a community, kind of like a pot that is on the stove that is bubbling over for a very long time, and a police shooting can bring the emotions, bring everything to the surface, in terms of what can be done. And I was mentioning developing the infrastructure, and that will be focused on traumatic grief, because you're going to have a lot of young people and adults within the communities that are experiencing traumatic grief. We had the pandemic that we're still in, and a lot of loss of life, but you also have a lot of loss of life as a result of violence, both from with the police, but also from members within the community, and so these infrastructures that treat with depressive disorders, anxiety disorders, the impact of violence, psychoeducation, they are really, really necessary in communities that are dealing with trauma, but you tend not to see that type of input in the way that it is needed, and so that is another critical aspect. But I did mention the training the community in terms of developing a workforce within the community. And a lot of that also speaks to the nation and society at large, changing our perceptions and the stereotypes and our values with regards to how we value certain communities within Trinidad and Tobago, so that they can get the type of intervention that is necessary. But if we see them a particular way, certain communities a particular way, then it means we're better able to distance ourselves from what is happening, from the blockages of the road and the burnings of the tire. We're better able to distance ourselves from it. But if this is my problem, Dike, if this concerns me, then it means that our whole approach to treating with the issue has to change.
And I really like the fact you talk about, yes, there's so many things that may be happening outside the community, but at the same time, capacity skills need to be built inside of the community. I remember in another space, I was being escorted on a walkthrough, and the person was saying, okay, well, this person is a justice of the peace, so they can sign documents and whatever like that, but they also cater. So if you're having something, this is money that can be saved. Bring the food and the person will be able to cook this. So this is more money that you're able to put directly into the into whatever endeavor that you're having. And so being able to know your personnel and saying, okay, well, this person can help with this person can help with this person has institutional knowledge, and saying that we are all part of the solution, as opposed to saying, okay, well, there needs to be a specific person to bell the cat. But with regard to that, I want to go back to that analogy of that pot bubbling over, please. And I asked about it the last time, but suppressing trauma, what kind of effects can this have on our community as a whole?
I mean, suppression has to do with actively or subconsciously pushing away overwhelming pain or hurt or distress, thoughts, memories, feelings. We suppress them, and the thing with them, just like with the pot, they usually find a way of coming to the surface. With a trigger, they usually find a way of coming to the surface. And if that can happen for an individual, when we look at a community, you're going to have these issues coming to the surface, rising to the top. We're saying, yes, we are concerned with the loss of life and the police shootings, but it goes deeper than that. And treating with it, in a multi-pronged approach, is us saying, okay, we value your community. We value the people in your community. We value the lives of the people of your community. And so we want to see certain things change. We shouldn't have to drive on the highway, or you go on the bus route and you see the state of the community, and we see what is happening on the news, and we ask the question, what is going on? Why is this community marginalized? There are issues there that, if not dealt with, will continue to bring us to a place, as we saw this week, where things are exploding and getting out of control. So we have to begin to deal with some of the issues that the communities are experiencing and that they are raising. Are we giving ear to them? Are we listening to what is the experience of the men and the women and the boys and the girls in the communities that going through trauma?
And no space is living in a vacuum. There are individuals in the communities shining lights, beacons, trying to do the work. What are some of those things that you would share, have in solidarity, messages that you'd want to give those individuals who are working for good in communities?
Yes, Dike, I mean, you are so right. There are many individuals, organizations, NGOs that are on the grind that we don't hear about. And I want to say to them that you continue to do the work that you are doing, and that there are those within the country that value what you are doing, and we know that more needs to be done, and we hope that we can become the type of country, of nation, that will seek to join with organizations like that and individuals to really see changes take place within the community. DK communicates value. I value this community, and because I value it, I want to see things happen for them. I want to see employment opportunities and training, parenting trainings. I want to see social services moving in a different type of way to treat with the trauma, individual trauma, familial trauma that persons may be going through. I think it's so necessary, and hopefully we can have more organizations, more NGOs, more individuals come into the fore that would be willing to go into the communities, and that the members of the communities themselves would be welcoming and say, yes, come in and walk with us, come in and see what we are trying to build, what we are trying to do, and we are willing to accept the help and the assistance that can be offered.
And there are different ways to do things, Shakir. And so in this final minute, I want to talk about that, because in terms, you just asked that you hope that individuals are welcoming, but if you have seen people come in time and time again, and it feels as though it is more about doing things to almost kind of exalt themselves, what would you say to both sides of the equation in terms of allowing people to come in, and to how it is people try to insert themselves, engage?
My parents always taught me about humility, DK, that, you don't always have to do things to be seen. And just as you mentioned, there are a number of persons on the ground that are working within communities that we don't know about, that I can engage a community on a personal level. Even those that are within ministerial portfolios, as the case may be, that I can do that without having to be seen or to be noticed, just because I want to help and I want to see a turnaround within Trinidad and Tobago. So the way that you do it is so important. And I'm not doing it for the likes. And I mean, and there may be things that may need to be aired so that we can be aware of it. But the majority speaks to the heart. Do I have a heart for the people? Do I care about what happens to the people? And I think that is something that is so necessary: the humility, the willingness, the compassion, the empathy, to extend myself and my resources to help those that need it.
And with that in mind, we want to thank you so much, Psychotherapist Shakir London, doing it from the heart with humility and grace. And on behalf of our entire news team, I'm Dike Rostant. Thank you so much. This has been In Depth. Thank you for joining us.